New U.S. Dietary Guidelines related to alcohol, new certifications for 2 Kentucky distilleries, a collaboration between Barbecue and a Distillery, and bankruptcy updates are some of the news we'll cover on this week's Bourbon and Distillery News. Hi everyone, welcome to the Bourbon Obsessed Bourbon and Distillery News Podcast, your commercial-free, and therefore money-free, bourbon podcast for Monday, January 12th, 2026. I am Ed, and I am joined by my usual co-host, friend, and bourbon aficionado, Dean Langdon. Dean, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Ed. Thank you for asking. I hope you are too. Happy January to everybody. Happy dry January to those who honor that. And I'm actually undergoing some of that. So I truly appreciated your recent post about lower proof bourbons and the best ones out there, because that helps get through the angst of a dry January. So
yeah, I mean, so that article, so people who haven't seen it, it's in my newsletter. You can actually find it on bourbonobsessed.com. And there's also a whole separate podcast and YouTube video where I run through it. And I talk about low alcohol recommendations, which for bourbon, so in that 80 to less than 90 proof range, where you can lower your alcohol intake while still enjoying bourbon and lower your calories too. But that's a discussion for another day.
That's right. We'll circle back to that when we get to the dietary guidelines. But what about events? I haven't been to any events this week, but I bet you have.
And again, I mean, it's sort of pleasant to have a little bit of peace and quiet away from bourbon events. I really only did one thing this week, which was a pretty big thing. With our KBI group, we had our Bardstown Day yesterday. And that was great. We started at Willett for breakfast. We had the burger, well, all except two people who couldn't eat them because of dietary issues. But everybody who could eat them did. The burger's gigantic, and I was amazed how many other people ordered things like egg salad sandwiches and stuff like that.
I can barely get through one of those egg salad sandwiches myself. So
no, right. Well, that's quite a bit in itself. But the burger with pretty much anything is next to impossible. I mean, I've been there many times with people who just split a burger between 2 people, let alone eat it with a whole bunch of sides. But they did a pretty good job with all that extra food. I'm trying to not overeat these days, so I just stuck to the burger, which is already probably your entire day's worth of fat and calories, but it's an awesome burger. And then I also had a 14-year-old pour of a Willett family estate, which I used my Resi credit that you get with American Express cards every quarter, so that sort of made it free. At least that's what I'm telling myself.
There you go. Yeah. That sounds yummy. So,
but it was awesome. And then we went to the Oscar Getz Museum of Whiskey History here in Bardstown. And Jack Ryan, who's the executive director, gave us a little tour, and then we wandered around on our own. And I'd never actually been there. I mean, I've been in the area.
I've been in that space, but I've never really studied the museum part of it.
Yeah, because it's in Spalding Hall, which is where the Kentucky Bourbon Festival takes place, for people that aren't familiar with it. So I've been there countless times, but I really never spent time going through the museum. So that was really cool. And then after that, we went to Heaven Hill Springs, and our friend Mark Williams gave us a tour there, and we saw everything completely behind the scenes, including the drying house, which was really interesting. I've never been into one of these high-tech dryer houses.
Yeah, I haven't either.
No, and for people that don't know what that is, so with the the grains, once they've distilled, the spent grains are a big issue for distilleries. So a lot of distilleries these days are starting to, come up with creative ways to deal with it. And so Heaven Hill has just a huge drying house where they extract all the liquids from it, but leave the nutrient-rich remnants. And it goes through a big process and winds up as a big pile of dried grains, as it sounds like. And then it goes to... It actually gets sold. There's brokers that deal with this nowadays, and it winds up in animal feeds and all sorts of other products. So that was really cool to see. And then obviously we tasted a bunch of things and saw all the other parts of the distillery, and it's a very cool distillery. Have you been there?
No, I haven't been to the new one. And that sounds like that's like 3 days of events packed into one. It sounds like it was really a good time. So,
well, there was still more, but we'll just go. So then we went to the Old Steelhouse. Our friends, from the Old Steelhouse Distillery have that tasting room that opened recently on Main Street in Bardstown. So we went there for a drink. Then we went to Scout and Scholar for dinner.
Love that place.
And
Yeah, I've been there. I like that. So
well, that's always
you're a
great. There,
you're a master of pacing, Ed. So
well, and just a shout out there. I mean, Jeremy, their chef, has done a fantastic job with the food at Scout and Scholar. I love their, so to continue my healthy day, I have the chili cheese dogs because they're absolutely fantastic there.
uh-huh.
So I won't be eating a lot of meat today, or so I say. But they're really good.
So I wonder what the dietary guidelines say about meat. Now you've piqued my interest. So
Well, we're only going to talk about the dietary guidelines and alcohol. So,
okay, all right.
so yeah, that was the day, and I don't know if anybody else went out after that, but that was already quite a full day for me. So I used tried to use what's left of my good judgment, and went home.
Bourbon is all about good judgment, right?
Right.
So
It
all
says
the
so right there.
judgments, all the judgments that go into making it and preparing it and aging it, and it's just so we can enjoy it, and that's one of the things I just love about it. It is such a carefully crafted spirit, and it's just, to me, that makes the enjoyment of it all the better. So
Yeah. And we always use good judgment while we're enjoying it as well.
that's right. Yeah.
All
All right.
right.
So
So,
what about the news? What's going on with the news?
well, now we'll dive right into those guidelines. So there's been a lot of recent headlines lately, like a lot everywhere, almost as much as the Jim Beam distillery closure, about the new 2025 to 2030 U.S. dietary guidelines and their relationship with what they've recommended for alcohol. And they're reporting that they're a major shift in the federal advice on alcohol. But the reality is actually more measured because people are reading too much into what's available right now. So far, only the short form summary of the guidelines have been released. So not the full gigantic document. So
Right.
differing from prior summaries, it is coming under fire for not setting specific daily limits for alcohol consumption and instead stating more generally to consume less alcohol for better overall health. In addition, the new guidelines are being criticized for not mentioning any associations between alcohol consumption and cancer, which we've talked about all that fairly recently,
Right.
actually. Importantly, the full guidelines in the executive summary have not yet been published, as I said, so we do not know what they will contain. Furthermore, the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, the people that put this together, deferred their alcohol review and recommendations. Well, the panel doesn't make recommendations, but they deferred where they were going to get their information to make their recommendations to the report from the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine report. And that does acknowledge associations between alcohol and breast cancer and women, and does talk about some of the other possible cancer associations. Until the complete guidelines are released, conclusions about how alcohol-related health risks are addressed remain premature. So all these headlines saying that the U.S. government's basically saying you can drink as much as you want to, and they're not, because even the limited guidelines say that the less the better. They've just taken the numbers out of this summary, and the omission of cancer in the previous short summaries, they didn't mention the cancer either. So It's been in the longer recommendations. So it's just, again, the media jumping to these clickbait headlines for everything. And people can say that I'm not a bourbon expert, but I actually could be considered an expert on medical literature since I was an associate editor of a medical journal for over a decade and was a university professor in medicine. So you can't do this when you read medical literature or any literature for that matter. So you got to go with just what's published at this time and realize that the full things are forthcoming. So just sort of struck a chord with me.
and I wonder how many of the news stories mentioned that there were going to be more detailed guidelines forthcoming, right? They tend to leave that out sometimes because they're just trying to get, clicks and views. And, we can go on for hours about the news cycle and how it's sort of fallen apart. But, it's all got to be right, everything right now, and it's all urgent. So it really hasn't changed, right? We understand that if you drink alcohol to excess, it's not good for your health.
Right.
And in moderation, what are its impacts? That's up for debate. It's a great socializer, and community is important for long life too. So you have to weigh that balance. Everybody needs to do that individually.
Right. So Yeah. So the bottom line is, I mean, none of these things say to start drinking if you don't drink. And,
Nope.
all that was dropped was that, 1 to 2 day drink per day. And we've talked about what a drink means nowadays, too. And
Yes.
that 1 drink a day for women, 2 drinks a day for men, using the guidelines of a 1.5 ounce 80 proof pour, it doesn't even cover 1 drink or cocktail nowadays using 100 proof bourbon. So that's the whole other story. So, yeah, so we'll have to wait for the full guidelines. So the bottom line is that I think people wanted cancer. The people that are against alcohol, wanted cancer mentioned in these summaries, and they didn't like to see the numbers go. But they're using that National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine report. So there's no way it's gonna. Well, I don't know what it will do, but it shouldn't leave out mention of cancer because it is definitely stated in one of their main conclusions.
Yeah. Clearly it doesn't say don't drink unless if you don't, you shouldn't start necessarily. But everybody needs to make that choice for themselves. And if you want to wait until the more detailed guidelines come out, well, just don't drink as much until they come out. I don't think it's all that complicated for those of us with a nice bottle in front of us. Keep on sipping.
Yeah. So don't get drawn in by the clickbait headlines.
Right.
All right. So our next story, so Bardstown Bourbon Company is part of Lofted Spirits, has once again earned the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Energy Star certification, recognizing the distillery as performing within the top 25% of comparable industrial facilities nationwide for energy performance. Bardstown Bourbon Company was among the first U.S. distilleries to receive the Energy Star certification in 2023, and the renewed designation reflects continued improvements in energy performance. Despite more than doubling production capacity since 2018, the distillery now uses approximately 30% less energy by capturing and reusing heat generated during distillation. The certification highlights ongoing investments in operational efficiency while maintaining production scale and consistency.
That's pretty impressive to double production with a third less energy use. I mean, that's just a great use of what technology is out there. I'm sure they had to do some pretty serious planning and engineering to accomplish that. So it's good to see them invest in things like that, and they continue to make wonderful bourbon, right? So, let's don't lose sight of that. That made me think about whether, last couple of weeks we talked about Beam and its shutdown of its Claremont distillery, and the fact that they're going to be, sort of updating and renovating that. I would expect that energy conservation and energy use would be a big part of that. Haven't seen any details about it, but as that progresses, maybe we'll get some information that we can share with folks about how hopefully Beam will be doing something similar as far as, who knows if they get Energy Star certification, but hopefully they'll be greener. Okay?
Well, I'm pretty sure their intent is to be very green because we talked about how they had that huge renovation to their big Boston plant and made that much more energy efficient. And I've heard from their presentations at the Beam Institute, they are definitely working on all of the systems to turn their spent grain into energy and reuse the water and all of that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's part of what's happening during that year shutdown there to bring that up to speed.
Right. And we know other distilleries have picked up that baton. And so Beam could really be, a leader, especially, and they can use the Jim Beam Institute to try and help other distilleries accomplish the same goals. So I think that's great. And we divert a little bit from Bardstown Bourbon Company. They're right up there in that same category. Getting Energy Star for a business that is as energy intensive as a distillery is a great accomplishment.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I guess we'll go a little out of order here because we'll skip to the other related story on this. So there's Whiskey House of Kentucky announced it has earned a ISO 9001, which is quality management systems, ISO 14001, which is environmental management systems, and ISO 5001. I assume that's how you say these, but I guess I don't know for sure. Occupational Health and Safety Management Systems certifications through the NSF. Less than 18 months after completing construction of its Elizabethtown, Kentucky distillery. The 3 internationally recognized certifications confirm that the facility meets established standards for quality management, environmental responsibility, and workplace safety. According to the company, ISO 9001 supports consistent product and service delivery delivery through process control and continual improvement. ISO 14001 provides a framework for identifying and reducing environmental impacts, and ISO 45001 establishes requirements to reduce workplace risk and prevent injury and ill health. Whiskey House of Kentucky is a purpose-built contract distillation facility, and the company stated it is also working towards additional certifications in 2026, including FSSC 22000 and ISO 17025.
And as tempting as it was, I did not go look up those additional certifications, but
I did, and I don't remember. I think one of them is another food grade certification. I can't remember what the other one is.
I mean, I went back and looked some on their website, and this was mentioned in their year-end report, although I don't think they had actually been granted when they put that report out. And this is a very recent development, but they're really just at the forefront of a lot of technological and new business model developments in the industry. They've got started on a 7-story warehouse using something called a KRAC system that's going to let them put 48,000 barrels in that, and apparently it helps. It helps circulation, airflow, things like that. I didn't realize they shipped 5 tankers of distillate to Asia last year.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was in their annual report. So, I mean, it's just, they're turning into a world whiskey producer, it sounds like to me. And I think that's great to have them here in Kentucky and be at the, we've always been at the forefront of distilling, but they're sort of taking it to the next level. And I just think that's great. I wish them all the best.
Yeah. And I from what I could tell, I mean, I obviously don't know much about all of these certifications, but from what I could tell in reading about them, it sounded like a pretty big deal to be able to get all 3 of these in such a short amount of time for a brand new business. It sounds like most of the time you work for quite a while just to get each one of these. And I think it goes back to that. The Whiskey House of Kentucky, I don't know if you've been there, but it's very cool. I mean, it's super high tech, incredibly purpose built, and for incredible efficiency and everything else. So it was, I'm sure, built right from the start with these certifications in mind. So it's running like, I don't think many other distilleries in the world run with this kind of a methodology. So it's really quite impressive.
Yeah, no, and I haven't been there, but I remember we talked about the fact they did 11 different mash bills in the course of a week. I mean, their ability to use technology to get a great product it just surpasses anybody else's, it seems like. So
yeah, and unlike a lot of the other distilleries, they're not built as a visitor attraction. They're 100% focused towards their production and their clients. There's workspaces for them to come in, and they're certainly, obviously can come in and work with their liquids and try things and, talk to the experts there. But as far as the public coming in, unless you're with, a media tour or some other sort of special tour, that's really the only way, because it's not got a tourist visitor center. It's in no way, that's not one of their things. So they're not getting distracted by any of that. They're totally dedicated towards making the whiskey, which is pretty cool.
And they don't have any of their own products, right? They put out nothing under their own name. It's all for third parties. So you don't have to worry about them competing with you and all that good stuff. So I mean, I don't know, that's a great model, and I think it's very insightful of them to be doing all this stuff.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned the international thing, I remember one of the times because we've talked about both them and Lofted Spirits a considerable amount of time on our show, because they're just both constantly doing things and really setting standards for the industry. But I remember something coming up once where it was something about international. So now I'm understanding more exactly what's happening. Although I guess that's just the tip of the iceberg. But we know that they're sending all of that overseas. I wonder what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, there was very little detail about that, but it's like, so yeah. So what? If you're a producer for others, you can produce for anybody all over the world. They just send you their mash bill, right? If it's for somebody, for example, in India, it's going to be hard to say it's grain to glass unless they're shipping the grains from India over here, right? But on a large scale, they are apparently so efficient. If it's so efficient that you can produce it, put it in the tanker, and ship it to a foreign country and have it be profitable, that's amazingly efficient. I mean,
that does seem almost hard to believe that would be less expensive.
I mean,
But
they do that with coal and oil and things like that. And so, I mean, it's clearly there's economies of scale, I guess.
yeah,
But man, that's really impressive to me.
no, very impressive. I'm not very interested to see what they're not publicly traded or anything, so we only will ever find out what they want us to find out.
Right.
But maybe if we ever expand into having interviews, we can interview them and get a little more information about that, because
Yep.
that's pretty interesting. Never really talked to any American distillers specifically about overseas related production and sales. So
Right.
all right, so
Okay.
moving on to
Put
our
them on the interview list. Yep.
yeah, which hopefully we will start.
We will. Yeah. It's coming.
But all right, so moving on next. So now we have a first of our bankruptcies. So A.M. Scott Distillery, which is a craft spirits company founded in Troy, Ohio, in 2022, that operated locations including the now closed Moeller, not sure how you pronounce it, Mueller Brew Barn in Troy, Dayton, and Monroe, has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in the U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Southern District of Ohio. Court filings list the company's assets at under $500,000 and liabilities of approximately $3.35 million amid mounting losses and bad debt that outpaced revenue. Owner Anthony Tony Scott is awaiting trial on criminal charges alleging he deprived the victim of more than $6,500 in business product and attempted to pass a bad check, and the business has faced at least one civil lawsuit from an investor alleging improper treatment of related entities. The bankruptcy petition and related legal troubles come after business partner disputes and the closure of multiple locations. And that was from stories at Kentucky.com and the Dayton Daily News.com. I don't know if you found actual bankruptcy documents.
I did. I spent this morning looking through some of the bankruptcy documents for A.M. Scott. It's a small operation, and it's a story that we see over and over again in the bankruptcy world, which is a small business that gets different business partners and they have a difference of opinion or things don't go well, and it's a technical term, it craters, it falls apart. And so these folks started out, they're a non-distilling producer, using other people's juice. Some of the information I found out was like they sold 16,700 bottles in 2023. So they're not huge, obviously. But what they tried to do was to get into it was called the Mayflower Hotel, I think in Troy, Ohio, renovated that. Getting into that and opening a restaurant and a tasting room apparently caused them to run it at six-figure losses for over a year. And ultimately they decided that to jettison that project. And so after having invested, I'm sure millions of dollars into it and it not coming about, it did open, but apparently it didn't do well enough to keep the company going. That led to internal fights and lawsuits and things like that. And so, the company filed a bankruptcy. It is pivoted. The owner's declaration says they're just going to go back to producing. They've switched to a different location altogether. And again, they're not producing their own juice, but they're going to be, selling under their own label. They got into trouble with a type of lender I call a merchant cash advance. It's like a payday loan for a business. In order to try and bridge the funding gap, they got deals with like 4 or 5 of these companies. I looked at one of them in the record. The interest rate on it was 93.66%.
Holy cow.
It's really, really hard. I don't know any businesses that have a profit margin of 93%. And so when you think about it, it's just really hard to make something work when your capital is at that cost. And so, we'll see. It's off to a relatively quiet start. They got approval to pay the insurance and the taxes. They do owe some past payroll taxes and sales taxes. So, it'll be an uphill climb, but again, it was just filed in late December. There's nothing much coming up until later this month. Status hearing is set for sometime in February. So there's all the skinny on A.M. Scott.
So what happens to all these debts, though? So they owe so much money. If they're going to come out of it and just continue operations on the much smaller scale again, these debts are just going to evaporate. And who would do business with them again, though?
You'd be surprised. So yes and no on the debts. Debts like taxes, sales taxes and payroll taxes, those don't go away. Bankruptcy says you have to be able to pay those in full over 5 years. but you do get a chance to pay them. And they had apparently already entered into a payment plan with Ohio for the sales taxes anyway. So they knew there was an issue and were dealing with that. This is a type of bankruptcy called a subchapter 5. It's for small companies. So it's meant to move quickly. But the bottom line is all these other debts, they'll get probably pennies on the dollar. It's a process of projecting what the profits are going to be over the next 3 to 5 years, and these creditors will share in those profits. So, it's I see different levels of financial projection sophistication. Some folks are just sort of poking around blindly in a paper bag. Others will go out and hire, an analyst and actually do a more robust projection and use that. The court has to approve a repayment plan, and the court has to believe that it's somewhat based in reality. That's going to be an issue here because they have pivoted. Past results certainly don't show that this can succeed, but again, they've pivoted. So, it's really early in the case, but, that's a long answer to the question of, well, no, a lot of people are going to be out of the picture. Why do people still do business with them? Well, right now, people may be doing it on a COD basis, where it's like, look, you need this product. Great, I'll deliver it to you, but you have to pay me when I give it to you. I'm not going to give you 30 days to pay me, right? So different things like that go on. Maybe he found some new investors. I did see in there that apparently he and his wife sold their home and put $300,000 from that into the business. So it's pretty common for a business owner to have sunk their whole, life savings and assets into a business, which is always unfortunate. So
yeah, because it sounds like going to the smaller scale, the possibility of paying off $3.35 million is extremely low, especially at that crazy interest rate, because you can't pay it. It's going to grow faster than the debt's going to grow faster than you can pay it off.
Another nice thing about bankruptcy is usually when you, depending on if people have a lien on things or not, if there's no lien, there's no further interest on it. It just cuts it off right there when the case is filed. So, time will tell. I mean, this case could go south. It could be, we've seen them where they start in a reorganization, they get switched to just liquidating into a different kind of bankruptcy, a Chapter 7. It wouldn't shock me if that happens here, but we'll see. They get a chance to try and make it work.
Did it say anything about those brew barns? Because I thought that was interesting, too. It sounded like three separate beer-focused places in addition to the distillery and what you're discussing. I mean, it sounded like there was an awful lot going on with their small business.
I think that's what was their death knell, is they were trying to do too many different things. They were trying to have different locations. And there wasn't a clear, model for we're going to be a distillery, or we're going to be a restaurant, or we're going to be a beer house, right? And you can't be everything to everybody. Pick a lane, pick a lane, and see if you can make that lane work. And if it does, then you think about branching out. So I do think that was a big part of why they are where they are.
Well, hopefully it works for them. I know. I'm pretty sure my friend Ray, who's done some reviews on bourbon. Well, has his own newsletter, and I've published his reviews on BourbonObsessed.com. Had reviewed one or two things from them, and I thought he actually, if I'm remembering correctly, he did like what they were doing. So hopefully they will be back to that.
Yeah, and again, it's somebody else's distillate. I don't know. If it's that could be like somebody like Middle West, right? Who's selling to them, or it could be anybody. But I don't think they had their own distillery to speak of.
No, I want to say it was MGP, but that is based on a very weak memory of of it. So don't hold me to that. But all right, and then our last actual news story before we talk a little more about some of the other bankruptcies is a happier note. So, Meat Church BBQ has acquired a minority ownership stake in Pursuit Spirits, marking a strategic partnership between the barbecue lifestyle brand and the American whiskey producer. The investment, led by Meat Church founder and pitmaster Matt Pittman, is intended to support Pursuit Spirits' growth initiatives, operational enhancement, product innovation, and brand awareness to the Meat Church congregation that has surpassed 1 million, I guess, in his supporters and fans. The investment was also part of the build-out of Pursuit Spirits Whiskey Row tasting room in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm not exactly sure what that means, unless he was involved earlier on before this announcement. And then founded in 2018 by Kenny Coleman and Ryan Cecil, Pursuit Spirits produces the Pursuit United line of bourbon and rye whiskeys and emphasizes blending whiskeys sourced from multiple distilleries. The partnership represents the first equity collaboration between influencers in the barbecue and bourbon categories and is expected to include joint product development and cross-promotional efforts.
And this is a positive thing, right? I mean, I know that they had worked together before, that you know, the folks at Pursuit had done stuff with Meat Church and vice versa. So it seems a logical pairing. Interesting that that he got involved really to help put together. It sounds like he got involved to help put together their downtown Louisville location. But I didn't see any real specifics, right? We don't know kind of what kind of stake he got, or I would love to know what you can look at what somebody gets into a company for, what they pay for what share, and therefore you can get a valuation for the company as a whole based on that. I'd love to get a sense of what valuation was placed on Pursuit Spirits at this buy-in level, and surely he got some good terms, because they're looking at this, I'm sure, more like a partnership than just somebody investing, right? He's going to be involved, and there should be I can see some great cross promotions here, right? That would be beneficial to both companies.
But that's mainly, and probably more on the whiskey to the barbecue fans than vice versa, because that's not quite as scalable unless you opened a restaurant here.
Right.
But not having spoken to them about this, that's what I would assume. So, if he started to promote it more in his own channels, and he really has 1 million followers, and I don't know much about Meat Church except honestly what I've heard about them on Pursuit Spirits, on Bourbon Pursuit podcast. But going to the website, it looks like a pretty big operation with sauces, and I don't know how many physical locations he has, but that certainly sounds like a good way to get their whiskey out in front of more people. I think it's always difficult when you're looking at, even though things may be related, trying to take a whole bunch of barbecue fans and then suddenly make them Pursuit Spirits buyers is a pretty big leap. But if you can, just get a small percentage of 1 million people, that is still a pretty big bump in sales for them. So, and it'll grow. And if they see it more, on his sites and physical locations, do you know does he have how many restaurants does he have?
I honestly do not know. I didn't think that. I thought it was mostly. He's got various rubs that he sells on the website, right? And he's got video, if you will, instructional videos about barbecuing. I really don't know what kind of a retail. If he's got brick and mortar places or not. I don't know if he has, but I can see some pairing some rubs with different types of Pursuit bourbon and things like that. So it just seems like they can naturally go together. It seems like, and I'm pretty sure I know Pursuit distributes in Texas, so I think that's where he's located physically, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know enough about him, but. And I guess I could see a bourbon barrel finished barbecue sauce in the future.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. He can get a food truck and put it outside the actual distillery in Louisville, right? So
it probably wouldn't be a terrible idea.
No, probably wouldn't. Yeah.
You'd need the permitting from the. But yeah. All right, so that's really our news stories. So you're going to update us a bit on some of these ongoing bankruptcies.
I will. So let me start with the one that's closer to home, the Luca Mariano bankruptcy. And you may remember that first the holding company that owns the real estate filed up in Michigan. But eventually in October, end of October, first part of November, the actual distillery filed, also up in Michigan. Those cases are being run together. I don't think it's any surprise that the goal here is to have a sale of everything. And so there's been a motion filed in the bankruptcy world, the way we do this is we ask the court to approve bidding procedures, right? We want to market the property, we want to get people to make offers, and we hope we have a bunch of offers so that we have an auction, but we want the court to approve a procedure for doing all of that. So that's what's in front of the court right now. The proposals, the specifics of what they're proposing is to get what we call a stalking horse bidder, somebody with an opening bid that we can say, look, this group has done all the due diligence and they're willing to pay X for it. And so that makes it easier for other folks to come in and not spend weeks and months doing due diligence because they rely on this other company. And so there's going going to try and have a stalking horse by February 3rd, bids by February 20th, an auction on the 25th, and then an actual hearing to approve a sale on March 3rd.
Wow, that's pretty
So
quick.
that's what's being proposed. That's a pretty fast time frame. And apparently there was a deadline last Thursday or Friday for anybody to object to those. 3 people objected. Farm Credit, actually there's 2 farm credits, Farm Credit Leasing and Farm Credit Mid-America. Farm Credit Leasing has basically paid to build their rick house, but owns it and they lease that rick house back to them, okay? I don't know what the actual Farm Credit does. They just have 2 notes. And then a company called Keystone Industry, which helped build the distillery, has the mechanics lien. So basically the gist of their objections was, that's moving too fast. You should have more time to market it. Their big objection was, you're making everybody bid on everything all together. Here I am, Farm Credit Leasing, and I'm owed whatever I'm owed on this rick house. I should be able just to bid the amount of my debt on that rick house and keep it if I want to. That's a pretty legit objection. I expect that they will kick these deadlines out some, and they will have an auction we just do it. We try to sell it all at once, and then we try to sell it in pieces, and whichever brings the best result is how we end up doing it. So that's what I think will end up happening. They've agreed. People may remember there were a lot of contractors who had worked on this and had liens. And then there's a big lender called Summit Bridge that also, I think they owed $20-some million. These parties have mostly agreed on the priority of who gets money first, second, and third. So that was going to take months, if not years, in state court. You get them into bankruptcy court and they agree on this because they're going, look, we're just spending more money. Why can't we agree that here's how the funds are going to flow once we get some money? And so we'll see. Part of that was they agreed that Summit Bridge would get the money from the actual bourbon. There's, I think, 6,000 barrels of bourbon. And when that sells, that money will go to pay Summit Bridge. And Summit Bridge is going to get paid first. The mechanics lien people are like 4th in line. So we'll have a sale in the spring of Luca Mariano Distillery. And there's the update on that one.
Do we know if there's any bidders at this point?
We do not. Because again, this just got filed, and the court has not approved these procedures yet. So that will be the next step. There very well could be. There is the owner of the company has been displaced by what we call a chief restructuring officer. So there's an individual from a company called Aurora Management Partners who is now running this process. I don't know. It's not clear to me if the distillery is still operating, if it's still open to visitors. That wasn't in the court papers, but hopefully it is, because people have more interest in an operating distillery than one that's shuttered, right?
But I mean, that's I think the big question to all of us looking in from the outside about these big distillery sales. And Garrett County's a much bigger distillery. Is who's in the market for distilleries these days?
Well, that's right.
I mean, you don't want to just wind up like the people that just declared bankruptcy because you can't make ends meet.
Yeah, you look at, Beam shutting production for a year. Diageo has stopped some productions and has laid off. Brown-Forman's laid people off. The big 6 are not likely buyers, doesn't seem to me, of any of these facilities. And so, it'll be interesting to see the results of some of these. As we work through the spring and into the summer, I think we'll start to see some of that. Segueing to Garrett County, I really couldn't find out much about that. I know the receiver is trying to find a buyer for it, but to me, that's a really tough sale. It's a much bigger facility. And again, it's not operating, right? So you're just buying the pieces and parts. I don't know what kind of inventory is there or things like that. But
I don't remember the story and I don't remember the numbers, but they had tens of thousands of barrels there, as I recall. Maybe was it 20,000? I don't know. It's been a long time,
yeah.
But I don't know if that's part of. I don't know the story with that. How much of that is held for other people as the storage? How much of it's already been bought? How much?
Right.
Any of that?
Yeah, and what we see is that these get. They get split up into pieces and parts. So, for example, at Luca Mariano, the rick house, they didn't own it; they leased it, right? And we all know that you can pre-sell barrels. You can store for other people. That can make it really complicated when you're trying to sell something.
Yeah.
And then you're a buyer, you're going, what exactly is it that I'm buying? And you need good attorneys and good financial people to figure all that stuff out. So you get a good bargain for your money.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, that is another beautiful high-tech distillery with a large capacity. So, but yes, who needs that? I mean, it's, you can't help thinking that when we went through Heaven Hill Springs yesterday, another brand new distillery, but then don't know the specifics, but we do know that Bernheim, the big Heaven Hill distillery, hasn't been operating at its full, 24/7 capacity for a while. So then you wonder about this starting up a new distillery when you're slowing down at your other distillery, and
right.
You hear these projections of just how much can be produced, but then it's like, well, do you want to? I mean, Heaven Hill's always had a little bit of a different philosophy. I mean, they always continue producing at pretty high volumes during downturns, expecting things to turn around and having all their whiskey styles, and they do have, there are countless other lines of products too, because they're a huge alcohol company, but their philosophy of doing that has worked well for them up to this time. So I assume, they're going to continue, but it just seems like an odd time to bring another big distillery online. But so likewise with these, I mean, I'll be interested to see who would buy Garrett County, who needs that capacity.
Why wouldn't you just place an order with Whiskey Thief? Or not Whiskey Thief, Whiskey House, right? Why not just let them make it for you? I don't want to buy a distillery right now. Unless I'm capacity constrained, I want somebody else to do it. I want them to pay the overhead, right? So, because that way, if it doesn't work out the way I want, I haven't sunk all this money into a distillery. So.
Oh, no. I mean, and I think that's what all the contract distillers are relying on. I mean, it's a good time for them, and it's a good time for people who just want to buy all those barrel inventory that's out there. But what most people that are in the industry that know more about it than we do, suggest that those are still good options if you're going to start a brand or grow. But building an actual distillery itself is not necessarily the way to go at this point.
Right.
So, yeah, that's what the big question, that they make all these plans to sell and everybody agrees on it, but then somebody's got to actually buy it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Well, it's like I say, we'll find out this spring and summer what kind of market there is for a distillery, even a newer high-tech one, right?
Yeah, and then I guess we got left another big one, the Uncle Nearest. Do we have? There's been a lot going on with that, and
there has been a lot. And again, I always start with our friend at Bourbon and Rye Club, and as I was reading through his stuff to get ready, it's like he's got the most wonderful AI-generated cat pictures I've ever seen.
I know.
And so, even if you don't care anything about Uncle Nearest or Bourbon and Rye, go check out his blog post on this, because the cat pictures are just hilarious. And so, Fawn Weaver is a unicorn cat with a unicorn spike in her head. I mean, it's just, his sense of humor about it is really unique, and I love it for that. So,
well, he's added a good touch of his own cynicism and sarcasm.
He really has.
So it's not the most. I mean, I like Mike. I've known him for a long time, and he's definitely got all the facts in there. But he's also there is a lot of his opinion.
There is, and to his credit, he puts his opinion in italics.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, even the stuff that's just reporting is sometimes snarky, but he's clearly saying, listen, this is just my opinion, and they're interesting opinions. They're a little bit tilted. So what's going on there is the Weavers have filed a motion to undo the receivership, basically to relieve him of his duties and give control of the company back to them. There's a schedule for the parties to submit writings about that. The receiver and the bank will respond to that by Tuesday, and then the Weavers have another week, and then it'll go to the judge, and the judge will take some time and decide that. I would be very surprised if the judge undoes the receivership. I don't see that in the cards, okay? The receiver had asked for clarification by adding some other companies that were related. And they agreed that they would give him information about those, and he was supposed to decide and ask for more information if he wanted it. He recently filed a motion for a hearing on that, because he does want to add some of these other entities. The Weavers have objected, saying, hey, we had an agreement, you were going to do this in a certain time period, and you didn't, and so you lose. again, we'll see how that plays out. One of the companies they want to add is a company called Grant Sidney, and the trustee, the receiver, says there was money going back and forth. There was like $20 million that went back and forth between Grant Sidney and Uncle Nearest. The Weavers responded to that, and I don't think our friend picked up on this. They say that, yes, Grant Sidney injected about $20 million into Uncle Nearest because that was part of the forbearance deal with Farm Credit, was to put more money into Uncle Nearest, and that it was a one-way flow of money, that it didn't go back and forth. We'll see, okay? But going back to the theme of, hey, company owners putting a bunch of money into a company to keep it going, $20 million is no small amount of money, and I don't know where that came from, but if that's true, that the receiver might take a hit on this one. He might not be able to drag these other companies in.
That's been like an ongoing issue with this case is that there's many companies that seem to have money flowing fairly freely between them, which is why they're being tied together, and they want to include them all as one because they've sort of broken what LLC's protection has.
Right. There's something called Shelbyville Barrel House Barbecue that operates on site. It's never paid rent. It's a separate company. And yes, there seems to be no honoring of the lines between the different companies, that the Uncle Nearest has been sort of fostering and helping some of these other companies that are collectively owned, at least mostly by the Weavers. So the receiver filed a second report, and he asked to file it what we call under seal, in other words, secretly. Okay, the Weavers agreed that it should be filed under seal and filed a statement saying that. So it undoubtedly has some information in there. The receiver's argument is putting this out in the public could chill bidding. It could affect what we're trying to do to resurrect the company. And we should, and it probably, Bourbon and Rye Club says, well, it probably has some stuff that's not so great for Fawn and Keith Weaver. And that's probably true, right? So the court hasn't ruled on that yet, but that report is not available, and who knows what's in it. What the other interesting thing that happened is a potential buyer actually sent a letter to the judge in this case. It got filed on the record. It's a company called NextGen 2780. And basically it offered to pay Farm Credit $108 million and pay the cost of receivership and take over the company. A lot of discussion about that. Is it valid? How come this person or this group isn't working with the receiver? Because the receiver is the one who's going to ultimately say, here's what we ought to do with this. And yes, he's got to persuade the judge, but I rarely see judges go against what a receiver is trying to do. So that's why they appoint the receiver, right? Here's somebody who knows about the business and knows about this, so the judge doesn't have to do that. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. It's sort of like a stalking horse. Like, oh, here's somebody willing to do this. There's lots of rumors about whether it's a legit offer, who these people are, whether they're connected to Uncle Nearest. Was this the investor group that was talked about before this happened? So, yeah, there's a lot of balls in the air, and we'll see over the next month or so. I suspect we'll see some of this shake out, and we'll get a better sense of where things are going. But right now, it's sort of a little bit of ordered chaos.
Well, and isn't there the one more thing? Didn't they sue their CFO during this?
They did, yes. So they, being Fawn and Keith Weaver, and I believe maybe Grant Sidney, and they made it clear that they're not doing this on behalf of Uncle Nearest because the receiver controls Uncle Nearest, right? The receiver has said, hey, they didn't tell us about this. That was something else in this response the Weavers filed on Thursday saying, you did know about this. Fawn Weaver sent you the complaint and stuff back in August or whatever, and it looks like there was some discussion about what this lawsuit could say and should say, and making it clear that it wasn't on behalf of Uncle Nearest. So there's so many balls in the air that the receiver is having a little bit of trouble juggling them all, and that's understandable. But yes, they've accused him, and some of the stuff in that email, let's see if I can find those notes. He took allegedly, Senzaki, their past CEO or CFO, directed equity, basically gave himself equity in the company without telling them, got loans without authority, and made like 28 draws on a line of credit over the course of 13 months that were millions of dollars. And so if those allegations are true, you can see how that could impact the success and the financial stability of a company. But yeah, I mean, who should have those claims? Should the Weavers have those claims? Should the company have those claims? And that's something the receiver is going to have to grapple with. I think if the company is harmed, those should be the company's claims, not the Weaver's claims, right? In the business world, when you've got a struggling company, money gets to the owners last. Only after everybody else gets paid do the owners get anything. And so there's a lot of people in front of the Weavers, for this company as far as getting people paid.
But going back to the beginning of this, I thought the Weavers were lumped in with Uncle Nearest because the same thing, their money and things were not being separated. And isn't that Grant Sidney basically Fawn Weaver? I thought also.
I think that based on what I've read, that's what it is. Yes, I mean, these are all what we call closely held companies, right? They're all created and owned by the Weavers, to do different things. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you keep those different things separate and you don't commingle things, right? So they were named as defendants. One of the things they raised in the thing they filed on Thursday was, we shouldn't be parties to this. There aren't any claims against us. We shouldn't even be in this lawsuit. Now, they haven't formally asked the court to dismiss them, but they made that point. And the last thing they filed is like, yeah, we're named as parties, but nobody has done anything against us and hasn't raised claims against us. I suspect they guaranteed a lot of the farm credit debt. I don't know. I didn't go back and check, but farm credit is waiting and letting the receiver do his thing. The Weavers, being not as happy with what the receiver is doing, are not waiting. They're doing all these other things, and that's creating a little bit of chaos, right?
Is this the same farm credit that's in Luca Mariano?
Yes. So there's farm credit has different arms. So like a lot of banks, trying to think of an example. Some banks will have a branch that just says equipment leasing, right? Farm credit has both an agricultural lending arm and also a separate leasing entity. So like Farm Credit Leasing bought the Rick House and leased it back to Luca Mariano, but Farm Credit, not the leasing entity, also loaned Luca Mariano some money, probably to get some of the real estate, and has a mortgage against that real estate. So, So they're
very much involved in all of these things.
Because it's agricultural at the end of the day, right? It's using a bunch of grain products, there's an agricultural impact there for sure. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the grain market. I don't think distilling uses such a huge amount of corn and wheat and rye that it's going to really have a big effect on the grain market in America, but it's going to have some effect because people aren't going to be buying as much, right? I mean, how much grain does Jim Beam buy in a year to distill at Claremont? Well, they're not buying it this year.
But isn't it? I always thought, and I don't know the numbers, but I thought that the beverage alcohol industry was just completely dwarfed by the fuel alcohol.
I think industry. It is. I mean, I think in the grand scheme of things, it's a minute portion of. It's going to be felt more locally than on a national scale. There's going to be some, I suspect, here in Kentucky, some grain farmers are going to need to find other markets.
Oh no, it's definitely going to have local effects. It's going to have job effects. It's going to do all of that kind of thing.
So that's all the doom and gloom I got, Ed. So that's all the doom and gloom I've got.
That's probably enough for our first episode of 2026.
Things are moving forward with these companies, right? I mean, again, we'll see some things happen. To me, it's an indicator of the future is what will happen with Garrett County and what will happen with Luca Mariano. If somebody buys Luca Mariano and keeps operating it, that's a real plus. God forbid somebody let's hope somebody buys Garrett County and starts it up. That'd be awesome, right? I think that's a hard sell.
Yeah, and we obviously haven't even talked about, there's still distilleries yet to come online that are under construction, and there's a whole bunch of other new ones that have opened recently. yeah, I mean, it's a very complex topic. Yeah, we certainly hope everything turns out for the best. I'm very interested to see if buyers emerge for these ones that are currently
me too.
on the market. But, all right.
Yeah, so you and I can put our resources together and probably get one on the cheap, Ed. So
we can. I'm not fully convinced we would make money with it, though.
No. If we were in our younger days looking for a long-term investment, I might be more inclined. But 20 years ago would have been a great deal. Today, not so much.
No, well, the last thing we wanted to do is wind up being a topic on our own podcast.
That's true. That's right. Yeah.
So, alrighty. Well, I guess on these brighter notes, we can wrap up this episode. And I hope you've enjoyed this edition of the Bourbon Obsessed Bourbon and Distillery News Podcast, your commercial-free and therefore money-free bourbon podcast. We'll be back next Monday for our new releases podcast, and hopefully we're actually going to have some to discuss because those have not really picked up all that much. I mean, other on a smaller scale, which we generally don't report about on the local single releases because most people can't get them. Also, be sure to like and follow us at your preferred podcast provider so that you don't miss an episode. And don't forget to tell all your friends, too. You can also head over to bourbonobsessed.com to check out some of our over 350 bourbon reviews and over 50 distillery write-ups. While you are there, you can also sign up to have my newsletters delivered directly to your inbox. Finally, I can also be found on Instagram at Bourbon_Obsessed and on Facebook at Bourbon Obsessed, and would love for you to follow me there as well. Dean, where can they find you?
People find me on Instagram at Dean of Bourbon with underscores, and as it's been, I'm going through a dry or what I call a damp January. I haven't been posting much, but I'll break out some of my my unicorn bottles and just post pictures so folks at least have something to look at.
Or your low proof bottles and take a sip and
I don't have any of those.
Yeah, you pretty much don't. I can attest to that. All right, folks, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.